All right, guys, welcome today to the um, the upcoming webinar for the Illinois soybean growers. Today, we're going to talk about prioritizing grain bin safety this harvest, and I think anyone that's following the news knows that this is a major issue and just a very timely issue right now. And so, we're really excited today to have Ryan Thompson from AGI and Rachel Wilson from El Paso EMS come and join us as we talk about this issue. Ryan's going to lead off with a presentation, and then Rachel's going to join for a panel conversation at the back end. And I encourage people to put questions in the Q&A during the presentation or at any time, and we'll get to the panel discussion and be able to address those questions. And before I kind of kick it off, I do want to thank AGI as the sponsor of today's webinar. You know, AGI is somebody who's been a strong sponsor and supporter for Illinois soybean growers, and that helps us lead into our efforts in Springfield and our efforts in elsewhere across the country. And so bringing opportunities like this for outreach and education, but also advocating on behalf of Illinois farmers. So Ryan, with that, we really thank you guys for being here, and I'll hand over to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Corey, and want to thank Illinois Soybean Association for allowing us and myself to be a part of this topic, and want to thank all you growers out there for attending this meeting today. Very powerful topic that we're going to speak on today. A bit of background on myself. Again, strategic account manager with AGI. I've been with AGI for over 4 years now. Bulk of my career has been spent on the agronomy side, seed side, actually as a grain buyer as well, and then transitioned into the technology space where I work primarily with our strategic accounts like commodity organizations such as Illinois Soybean Association, but companies in the food and beverage space, biofuels, sustainability markets, just seed industry, everybody that has a vested interest in the grain that you're producing and specific purposes that they have, and try to align them with technology and other aspects that AGI manufactures there. So with everything that AGI does with grain, I thought, just to speak to why the partnership with Illinois Soy and AGI is so powerful and so important to us. Is you can see from this list of companies here, these are all brands that are underneath the AGI umbrella. And really, at the end of the day, safety is the number one topic and priority of AGI when it comes especially to the grain handling, because AGI manufactures products that move grain, store grain, dry grain, condition grain, processed grain, everything that happens post-harvest when it leaves your fields. AGI has products out there that help facilitate those needs. So again, grain safety, especially grain bin safety, is an important topic at AGI and something we want to do whatever we can to help promote. But before we get into some tips and tricks on how to be more safe on farm, I thought it was important to start with a powerful set of data that comes from Purdue University. Every year they release a report, which is a summary of the U.S. agricultural confined space related injuries and fatalities. So what we're going to be referencing today in this discussion is from their 2024 summary. And if anyone would ever like to review it themselves, you could click on this link or go to this webpage, or just do a quick Google search for Purdue University confined space related injuries report and be able to find that information. But again, the reason we're all here to talk about bin safety comes back to this right here. In the 2024 report, there were no fewer than 51 cases. Thankfully, 29 of those were non-fatal, but unfortunately, 22 of those were fatal. And I think we can all agree one injury, one fatality is one too many. So we're doing what we can to try to spread awareness and talk about this topic so this doesn't impact anybody that's on this call or anyone that we know. With that information, though, roughly 38.6% decrease from the 2022 report and a 7% decrease from the 2023 report. So again, a good trend in the right direction of going down. We're seeing less incidents happen. And another positive trend in the right direction was from the 2024 report. 43% of cases were fatal compared to 58% historical average. So again, too many fatalities, but it is lower than the historical average. But conversely, we look at the other parts of the report that are out here today. No fewer than 34 grain-related entrapments. This does represent a 25% increase from 2023. So although we're seeing our incidents reduce over time, we did see the number of grain entrapments increase from one year to the next. The balance of those from that report, 17 of them involved livestock waste handling facilities. So even though today's topic is around grain entrapment and grain bin safety, I think it is worth noting a lot of our operations that we are on today have more than one entity to them. A lot of them have livestock involved with that. This topic really applies to not just grain bins, but anything that involves storing anything on the farm. So let's take some of the tips and tricks here today and apply that to all aspects of the farm. Now, again, 4 incidents involve more than one victim at a time. So that means we have more than one person entering into a confined space. 3 of those cases involve livestock waste storage pits, where 3 fatalities and 1 injury were the result. Again, very tragic to see that happen. We also had 9 additional grain dust explosions at commercial facilities. Thankfully, no fatalities. One such case involved an individual falling from an abandoned grain elevator unrelated to ag production. So again, we'll talk about this a little bit more going forward, but another case of a potential lockout tagout could have avoided this situation if we would have had everything tied up, secured, and unable for any entry into that space. So when you really dive into the numbers and the incidents that happen, unfortunately, Indiana and Missouri both experienced the most confined space related cases in 24, with each of them having 5. But they were followed by Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, which each experienced 4 cases each in each of the represented states there. Indiana reported the most grain bin entrapment cases in 24 with 5. But again, Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, Illinois, and Nebraska, in that order, have historically reported the most grain entrapment cases historically. This is going to happen from vertical or tower forage silo incidents. Those also have 4 fatalities and 3 non-fatal cases. OSHA regions 5 and 7 have historically accounted for 67.8% of all documented agricultural confined space related incidents. And I'll kind of reference that map here in a few slides, but I think regions 5 and 7 will really hit home for everyone involved in this call today. So I think, another thing that's important with this report from Purdue, which is a great service to us all, they have been tracking this since the 1970s. The Purdue Agricultural Biological and Engineering Department has been putting out this report. Very great resource to see and track what's going on. Thankfully, in 2013, the effort was expanded. They received a grant from the U.S. Department of Labor Susan Harwood Training Grant that has enabled them to further expand their research. And this has all the data here has been data coded and stored in the Purdue Agricultural Confined Space Incident Database. That's a mouthful, so we'll just call it the PACSID. And again, there's a website here if you would ever like to look at some of that data. It's all contained there. But again, as of the end of 2024, the PACSID contained over 2,400 cases documented. And all these cases have been reported since 1962 to when this last report was put out in 2024. That's a lot of cases that we're having happen on farm and even in the commercial space to be reporting on. 58.9% of the documented cases were reported as grain-related entrapments. And again, this is why we're talking on this topic today. This is the leading cause of agricultural confined space related incidents. So something that almost every farm has on their operation is a grain bin or something that stores grain. And again, the leading cause of most incidents there. Unfortunately, approximately 58% of all documented cases historically have resulted in a fatality. So again, the importance of this message and this training today is to help us reduce this amount greatly. We want to see everyone go to work safe, but come home safe as well at the end of the day. So a lot of information there that I went through. I encourage you all to go back to the web and pull up that report and dive into it a little bit more yourself and see how it could affect your operations. But again, some images I took from the report. This one is just the 2024 report incident type. And again, we can see grain entrapment was the #1 reported incident, having 34 entrapments reported in 2024. And asphyxiation and poisoning, probably relating to livestock waste facilities, entanglement, undocumented as other were the next ones, but alarming rate of grain entrapment incidents is what's getting reported on farm. Now, looking at the 10-year historical average all the way back to 2015, we really started seeing quite the increase since 2015, went down a little in 17, but up and up. 2022 was a very bad year for us. We had 83 reported incidents, but thankfully we've been seeing those trends go down, with about 55 in 2023 and another 51 in 2024. So again, going the right way down. We're getting close to the number of incidents reported in 2015. But again, if we can all do our part to reduce these incidents, I'd like to see this at 0 someday. Now, looking at it from an age perspective, I found this pretty interesting. Really nothing jumped out to me too alarming. As we all grow in our farming operations, it wasn't surprising to see the most incidents occurred from people that are from ages 31 to 80. We're getting going on farming, we're active in farming, or we're on the retirement end of farming and helping out as we navigate through the retirement process. But it also did kind of alarm me too, as with everything with agriculture, we're always bringing in that younger generation. So to see the number of incidents from ages 11 to 30 increasing, and that's something I hope especially any young viewers on the webinar today will take light in that and kind of realize it doesn't matter what age we are, as human beings, we are not invincible. So we need to heed some of the practices that we're going to talk about today, and try to stay out of the grain bins at all costs. Looking at the geographic distribution over time, you can see, being here with the Illinois Soybean Association, Illinois has accounted for over 234 reported incidents over the years. So again, not the highest, but it's still a pretty alarming rate. You can see right there in the breadbasket and the Corn Belt, we have an alarming number of incidents that get reported on a historical average. And then, as I referenced earlier, the OSHA region map. Again, regions 5 and 7 account for the most incidents at almost 69%. And we can see here, Illinois right in region 5, and our neighbors to the west in region 7 that account for Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas. These two regions alone count for almost 70% of all related incidents. So something we really want to drive home here today is how do we avoid these incidents and becoming a statistic in time. So from that, a lot of data to digest, good data, powerful data, things I strongly feel are worth of note. So how do we take some steps to avoid these situations? Looking at grain bins really in 3 different buckets of potential hazards here. From our perspective at AGI, we look at flowing grain, bridge or cliffed grain, or an avalanche/collapsing grain scenario. All of these are really our main types of incidents that occur on farm today. Of special note, flowing grain. Under no circumstance should we ever have the unload auger operational when anyone is in the grain bin. For whatever reason, that should not be something that happens, but unfortunately it does. What I feel powerful on this, if you look to the right side of the slide here, is how quickly flowing grain can create an emergency or a tragedy. If you're the average weight of 165, 170 pound individual, you really have about 2 to 3 seconds to react once the unload auger gets engaged. And within 4 to 5 seconds, you could be trapped up to your hips. And in less than 12 seconds, you could be completely engulfed. So literally within the blink of an eye, we could have something that majorly impacts your life, your loved one's life, your employee's life, whoever the case may be. Someone can be greatly affected in less than 12 seconds there. So that's if there's one takeaway from this, please never enter into a grain bin with the unload auger going, or never allow that unload auger to be triggered while you're in the grain bin. Looking at the bridged or cliff grain, that's another common one, and we'll talk on this a little bit further as it relates to technology and how to keep your grain safe. But this is something that happens all too often. We do our best as growers to condition the grain once we store it, so it's ready for when we send it to town for market. But bridged grain happens more often than the guy realizes. You know, we start pulling out of that grain, and unfortunately, the bin isn't in proper condition, and the top portion of that bin has a crust on it. And again, I worked as a grain buyer in the grain industry, and I think everybody in the commercial space knows this story where a grain inspector went up to a silo at a site, was doing their inspection, got done doing their inspection, come down to give the report to the location manager, and the location manager just turned white, like he saw a ghost. The inspector asked what the problem was, and he said that particular silo has been empty for 3 or 4 months. So at the end of the day, that grain inspector was walking on bridged grain in a 90-foot silo. And, you know, I'm sure that story has changed over the years, but it is an actual situation that had happened. And again, it's something very real. You can have grain crusted enough to form a solid bridge up there that could collapse at any moment. So that is something you want to avoid at all costs as well. Another reason to not get into a grain bin unless absolutely necessary. Looking at the third scenario there with avalanche or collapsing grain, I think this is something that a lot of us commonly find ourselves in a situation of, unfortunately, where we have some of that grain just kind of sticking to the side of the bin, and we're chipping away at it. And again, just the same as with flowing grain, you can see all that collapse in the blink of an eye, and you could either be trapped or completely engulfed if it falls too hard, too fast, and you're in the wrong position. So again, one more reason to be very mindful and try to avoid entering into a grain bin at any cost. So with those situations, you know, what do we look at? What are some safety measures we can take to prevent these type of incidents from happening? First and foremost, I think one of the biggest things that we can do is always, always, always inform someone if you're going to go out and check bins. I know this, myself included, we operate on our own. May not be anyone else on the farm when we're doing these things, but you know, we all have cell phones these days. Make a phone call to a friend, neighbor, whoever. Never go check bins on your own. I cannot think of a worse situation than everyone's coming home for supper at night and there's an empty seat at the table and no one knows where that person is, whether that's dad, mom, son, daughter, grandpa, uncle, aunt, whoever, employee, whoever's supposed to be at the table isn't there. And all because we didn't tell someone we were going to go check grain bins. We decided to get in the grain bin and something happened, you know. So always make sure we're informing others if we're going to go out and look at and check the condition of our grain bins. Again, if what we strongly feel at AGI is never enter a grain bin, but if we do have to do it, only do it when absolutely necessary. And in those scenarios where we feel it is absolutely necessary to do that, always wear a 5-point harness and have it properly tied off. And by properly tying off that harness, that means you're going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to be able to reach every part of that bin. We want to make sure that that rope is tethered off to a position where if something falls or you get pulled in, it keeps you at least waist level above that grain and keeps you from getting completely covered. But again, never go to a bin by yourself. Always have spotters. Highly recommend having at least 2 spotters. In this situation, we're looking at having 1 spotter at the top of the bin with you that can be looking into the access panel and have a visual on you, and another one on the ground seeing that spotter up at the top of the bin. That way we have multiple ways of communication. In the event that an emergency occurs, we have multiple people there to take action and get everyone safe. And again, as I said earlier, do not ever have the unload auger running while you are in that bin. So how do we avoid some of these situations? A lot of people laugh at it, but it is very powerful and very efficient and effective method of having a lockout tagout process in place on your operation. Identify all the power connections to that bin site. So whether that's the overall bin site power, main switch, fan power, unload auger power, whatever those cases may be able to have all those shut off before we even think about entering the bin. And on top of that, lock them in the off position so nothing can get turned on by mistake while we are in a bin. It's going to also include stairs and ladders. This one unfortunately has some relevance to me. I don't think I mentioned earlier, on top of what I do for AGI, I also farm my family's ground in central South Dakota. It's about 150 miles from where I live. And so whenever it's time to get some things done at the farm, as with everything with the farm, we make it a family event. Bring my kids to see grandpa and grandma, get them involved, and always have a lot of things on my mind. One day I was working on a piece of equipment and grandma comes out and points to the grain bin, and there I see my youngest son, who was probably 9 or 10 at the time, standing at the top of the stairs. Kind of scared the jeepers out of me. So I get over there, calmly get to the top, and we have a little safety discussion. That was something I never dreamt I'd have to encounter. And after that case, we put something in place that prevents anyone from climbing the stairs of the bin and get in that situation again. So again, something to be mindful of. Stairs and ladders are also something that need to be locked down. Also the bin door, that's something that needs to be locked down. Again, some of those scenarios that we walked through earlier, bin is partially full, partially empty. Try to prevent anyone from getting into that bin at all costs. And the last thing we're going to speak about again today is look at a grain bin monitoring system. AGI makes a terrific product called AGI Bin Manager. That is a fully automated bin monitoring system. But having something in place that's telling you the condition of your grain is going to greatly reduce the need for you of ever needing to enter that bin in the first place. Because again, most of the time when these entrapments happen, it's because our grain is going out of condition. We need to inspect it. We need to do the sniff test. Sometimes we feel we need to walk around in it. Whether it's AGI Bin Manager or another bin monitoring system out there today, I highly encourage you all to look at something like that. Utilize technology to keep you safe. We utilize technology in almost every aspect of growing a crop today. And it seems a little bit silly that with all the technology and all the investment we make into growing that crop, that we're just going to put that grain in a galvanized can, turn on the fans, and hope for the best. This is something that will keep that grain in condition and essentially prevent you from ever needing to enter it because you're going to know what's going on inside the bin. Today's bin monitoring systems can give you the temperature and the moisture of the grain, the inventory of the grain. They have automated fan controls to condition that grain properly while talking to weather devices that are giving you both the ambient humidity and temperature conditions as well as what's going on in the plenum space. So it's improved grain conditioning through technology and automation. So with that, again, I highly encourage you, whether it's AGI Bin Manager or some other product that's out there today, I am going to speak to AGI Bin Manager on how it works to help you get a better understanding of how bin technology can affect your operation. Thankfully, AGI Bin Manager is the leading brand for bin monitors in the United States and also in Illinois. But it comes down to a simple ask of what is grain conditioning, and it's a pretty simple answer. At the end of the day, it's removing moisture, adding moisture, cooling your grain, rewarming your grain. But in theory, it's simple, but it's a harder practice to do. So put technology to use, and the technology is going to identify all these things that you need to achieve good conditioning. The equilibrium moisture content of the grain that you're storing, having good aeration system based on your drying or cooling purpose of that bin, a good monitoring system, having the proper amount of vents on top of that bin for good ventilation, keeping the proper grain mass configuration within that bin. A lot of grain goes out of condition because we leave that grain in a peak position, and air is no different than water. Air is going to take the path of least resistance. So when we have grain in a peak position, all your air is going to the outside, leaving that center part not getting conditioned properly. So always try to take that peak or that cone and invert it and get an inverted cone in that bin so our airflow is more evenly distributed when our fans are running. And also follow the proper cooling and rewarming procedures based on your weather for your area. All these things are needed to achieve good conditioning, and something a bin monitoring system like Bin Manager can do for you. Again, Bin Manager is a fully automated system telling you the temperature, moisture, and inventory, sends that information to the platform that's accessible 24/7 from the convenience of your cell phone, tablet, computer, whatever you prefer to view your data on, and it operates just off the electricity that's used to run the fans of the bin. This is all being done with a series of cables that's determined by the diameter of the bin, but in most farm bins, we're going to see these sensors spaced evenly, approximately every 2 foot on the bin. Once we get over 60 foot, then we might see those sensors get spaced to 3 foot and maybe even 4 foot on a really tall bin. But you're going to have a lot of different data points collecting data within that bin at all times. And it all is connected through the same system that you're seeing here. Starts with a control box that connects to the fans that tell the fans when to turn off and on, but also the weather station outside the bin, the air property sensor, the plenum sensor that's reading the temperature and humidity underneath the grain between the floor and the cement, talking to the communication box that sends and transmits the information to the platform for you to see at all times, and pulling all that information from the cables within the bin. So we take the safety so importantly. I mean, this is really at the end of the day why Bin Manager was created. It was the safety component, knowing that if we have full visibility of what's going on inside the bin at all times, we do not need to enter that bin until it's time to sweep the floor on the last load out of that bin, and all the reasons that we do that. So above all else, we can talk ROI on a number of things for whatever commodity you're storing, but safety is the number one ROI for any operation. So if that's something you would like to learn more about to help you navigate down that pathway, if you do not already take advantage of some type of bin monitoring system, I highly encourage you all to reach out to me, and we'll get you started down the pathway of a safe storage assessment. What we do at AGI, it's completely free, and we're going to get you connected with either myself, one of our sales managers, one of our dealers in your neighborhood, and we're going to help you identify what needs to be done or what a system could do for you. We want it to be an educational process throughout the whole assessment and plan for your success at the end of the day. What's included with a safe assessment is, first of all, run an aeration inspection. We can put together an aeration model based on your farm's geography down to the zip code, and pull up 10 years worth of NOAA weather data to show you how the system would have performed each of the last 10 years with a 10-year average on it. We're also going to talk about university guidelines that are out there, best common practices on how to condition that grain, talk about the best storage practices, look at the goals that you have for the grain that you're storing in this facility right now, and give you an overall demonstration of how the product would work for you. So again, all these things very important to bin safety, but a bin monitoring system like AGI Bin Manager is going to be able to provide you with the assurance security to maximize profits. The number one profit is everyone coming home safely at the end of the day. So if you'd like to learn any more about that or talk about more bin safety tips, please feel free to throw questions in the chat, or my information is here. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. Be more than happy to walk you through what we've experienced at AGI and things that we recommend. Thank you for that, Corey.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks so much for that presentation. And I already see several questions in the chat. I would encourage people to keep putting stuff in as we go here. Ryan, do you want to go to the next slide for me real fast?
You bet.
Yeah, just a quick reminder, Illinois soybean grower webinar. And if you aren't an Illinois soybean grower, I'd encourage you to become one by using the QR code here. And so with that, Rachel, if you are available, I'd like to hand it over to you. Rachel is with El Paso, Illinois EMS, and she is she trains the trainer when it comes to grain bin and other safety issues. And so she's going to join us. And Rachel, if you want to maybe share some thoughts about this season, or I don't know if I want to call it a season, but this harvest time, and then we'll shift over into the panel discussion.
Sure. So just looking at all of this data just kind of makes you aware that this is a ongoing problem. Does not have a simple fix to it for sure. It kind of depends on what the person has been raised with. The last several grain bin entrapments with elderly farmers, 65 and older. We've had a 73-year-old that was a fatality and an 85-year-old that was not. And the very first thing they always say is, I've done this my whole life. They get in the bin, they break up the crust and walk around. And we always just say, well, you were just lucky until today. Grain entrapment is very real. It happens every year without fail. My husband and I farm, and the one thing that he grew up with being told to him was, if you are emptying a bin, you do not get in. If you take anything away from this webinar at all about grain safety, please take that home. Is that if you are emptying grain for any reason, you do not get in that bin, especially when it's running for any reason. The consequences, death or a funeral, are much worse than any other thing that you could possibly have to do if you would just wait. The other things that I think face farmers out there is that we do work alone. We have a dying breed, so to speak. We have tons of young people wanting to farm, wanting to be in the ag industry, but yet they were raised in town and have never been on a farm, never been in a grain bin. That's why we hold the grain bin safety rescue classes for the firemen and EMS and first responders, is because I would tell you that 95% or more of those people have no grain bin experience at all. We only had 3 farmers in 85 people this last weekend that farmed that were in EMS or a first responder. Everyone else had no farming experience. That's a lot. And so I think the biggest thing is let's try and grow and move away from perhaps maybe bad habits or unsafe practices. The other thing you have to keep in mind, or AGI or any of those people, building these safety measures and monitors, those are all wonderful and fantastic. But with grain prices the way they are right now, that may not be something that they can afford. OSHA is a wonderful thing. They have lots of safety measures out there. And I think that we should follow them. But we all know that the farm doesn't always do that. And they're not required to, because they are not governed by OSHA. So we have to reach out, and something that came up this weekend with the grain bin rescue classes that we held in El Paso was, maybe we should start having these classes for farmers. Maybe we should start having these for anyone who starts at a grain facility. I know they go through training and much more so than what we would teach them, but in an 8-hour day, you can go from, hey, do I put my foot in the door of that bin? Or, oh, that's right, they said don't ever do that. I'll wait here until I get more advice from someone that either has done it longer, is a manager, something to that extent. You just really have to be prepared for anything. The biggest thing I noticed this weekend was the first responders in the EMS, the fire department, people that had never been on a farm were really terrified of a grain bin. And once they knew more about it and how it worked and what to expect and what to do and what not to do, they really felt like, okay, I can get in and help. We had an incident south of Bloomington where the farmers, and this is another point that I think a lot of people have to remember, we are the MacGyvers. we will try and fix it ourselves. And they did for 2 to 3 hours. And then they called 911. And I think to all the farming industry out there listening right now, uh, if you have an entrapment of any nature, whether it be big or small, up to your knees or up to your chin, you need to start activating the 911 system. And that for we can get the resources to you quicker, because the number one injury from corn bin or soybeans, any kind of bin entrapment, is a crush injury. And that is not something you see on the outside. That's something we see in 2 or 3 hours in the ER with lab work, and we watch your kidneys fail. So I just think that there's not enough information out there, and we need to really work on that and increase people's knowledge onto what happens if you are involved, increasing response. Last year we had 2 in our area. The first one was 10 to 12 hours. A lot of miscommunication, a lot of disorganization, all kinds of things played into it. We had an ag safety day that I held, giving EMS and first responders a lot of really good data to how to respond, who to call, and what order. And that grain bin rescue was 1 hour. That's amazing that they got it down to 1 hour. And most of them we are getting within the hour because people are calling right away. So I think that that is also very important, is to almost every single person out there has a cell phone strapped to them. Call 911. But the biggest takeaway that I was listening to Ryan talk about is, don't go do these things by yourself. I know that we have low help. We very rarely can afford to have paid help on private family farms. And so we do things independently to speed that up. And that's where we get in trouble, is the 73-year-old was checking bins and was going to unload him, and then he got engulfed and he died. Now you look back and you're like, I just wish, the whole family, I'm sure, is just thinking to themselves, I wish he would have said, let me go with you, or can I be there when you're in it. And that's one thing that my husband and I really agree on, is there's a phone call before anyone goes in a bin and works in a bin or works on a bin. We always have that communication, or someone needs to be at the door if we're unloading a bin and they've got a sweep auger running. There's your number one injury on the farm, is sweep augers and auger incidences. And that's huge. You have truly seconds in those situations. So I think that just stopping the rush, which again, we're fighting weather, we're fighting crop conditions, wind damage. There's all kinds of things that push us to rush. And we also don't work 8 to 5 or 8 to 4. We work 4 a.m. to midnight, and then we do it all again the next day. So I think there's several caveats that kind of lend itself to these situations. But I think if we started doing more education, one, to fire EMS and first responders, as well as the farming community itself. I don't think we should dumb it down or anything like that. I think all the farmers are very smart individuals. We just sometimes make bad decisions. And that gets us in these situations. So that is what I think would maybe help the most, because even my husband watching the lectures and different points of the bin, it was one of those things that you kind of knew would happen in a grain bin explosion, or how little dust it took. And when we did the demonstration with Coffee Mate Creamer, it was a tiny amount, and all it took was a little heat, and then you had an explosion. And then they can think in their head, hey, oh yeah, it's been way worse than that in that bin. And maybe they would improve their practices a little bit. I just think positive reinforcement and encouragement and education could go a long ways. Does anyone have any other questions or concerns about that? Sorry.
No, Rachel, so that was a great just kind of a share on where things are in Illinois, and I really appreciate that. Ryan, do you want to go to the next slide real fast for us? Yeah, so before we get into the panel questions, and I will say we have, I don't know, 10 or 11 questions right now to go through, so I encourage people to add them. But before we get in there, I do want to let everyone know that today's session is available for CEUs, and you can use that QR code on the screen at any time to get those CEUs. With that, we'll transition to the panel discussion. And let's see here. I'm just kind of going through. I'll go from the top here. So Ryan, I think you kind of hit this, and Rachel, you kind of talked about it too, but just kind of a broad question. What are some of the reasons for grain bin accidents? Why do they still happen? And I think that this was one of our pre-submitted questions, I think, too, where it was very much a concept of, hey, there's a lot of education out there, so why is this still happening? So I don't know, Rachel, if you want to jump first, and then Ryan, maybe you can follow up.
Sure. I think that I talked a little bit about it, is that old habits die hard. That, we're seeing this much older generation, 70s and 80-year-olds, they've done it their whole life. And because they've gotten away with it for 70 harvests, different things, they continue to do those practices, and they have a decreased response time, a decreased reflex. All of those things are fighting against them with their age. And I think that's when they finally get caught doing those bad habits, is that's their age has finally caught up to them. But it can happen with young individuals too. So I think that maybe it's just a really good time to, hey, think about what you're doing, and we can always solve it if we just slow down a little bit. I think the tight market, high inputs, very low grain prices, I think that's going to affect this too. We're going to work with less staff. We're going to haul all the corn ourselves and put it in bins because we're hoping the market swings the other way. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Unfortunately, I think, to be blunt, the main reason is just a lapse in judgment.
Yeah.
Right? We have information at the tips of our fingers at any point in time in the day. I think all of us as growers know that we shouldn't get into a bin, but
Right.
as you said, old habits die hard. So, I mean, more the root of the problem, outside of just that lapse in judgment of ignoring the fact that I should not get in the bin, is if I'm a grower that climbed to the top of the bin just to check the condition, I pop the lid and I catch a weird odor. Well, then that leads to me, curiosity killing the cat, so to speak, is
Yeah.
I'm gonna go in and take a look at it and see what is the cause of that smell. Even though I know I shouldn't do it, it's something I've done a zillion times before if I'm a 70-year-old farmer. But also for our young viewers here, I'm 15 years old and I'm invincible. Nothing's going to happen to me. It doesn't matter. It is unfortunate. It's a lapse of judgment that is triggered by the need to find an immediate answer to something that's going on. And again, to Rachel's point and what I spoke on, we know we should never enter that bin. But again, as farmers, we have a lot of things going on, and we think, well, I'll just jump in there quick, check it out, and get out. And unfortunately, sometimes that does not happen. So I think that's the main reason there.
Yeah, no, I mean, as being an ER nurse for a long time, we see snowblower accidents every winter.
Yeah.
And we're like, who in their right mind would stick their hand in that? And they do every winter. So, I mean, I think this is just one of those things where we all can say, wow, we should not do that. Or if you're in the farming operation yourself, you're like, no, you should never do that. But then that's when I worry the most about our young people coming in and helping and being part of the farming community to work and have a job. And they think they're being helpful. So they do something and they don't really realize the consequence that could happen to them.
Yeah.
And that they just don't have enough education about grain bins. So maybe we need to work on that too.
Oh yeah, so I think that's great. And Ryan, I love the comment. Just to be honest, it's about a lapse in judgment. That's why these things happen. I think that's really valid. Ryan, I'm going to throw this at you because it's about grain bin size. And I don't know if this is a misconception. I think I have actually heard this before, but if grain bins are bigger, does that make the accidents more likely? Do you agree with that? What are your thoughts there?
Well, in theory, yes. I mean, at the end of the day, incidents can happen in any size bin. I don't care if it's a 5,000 bushel bin or a 500,000 bushel bin. But I think you could make the argument that they could be more more frequent and larger bins. Just from looking at perspective, if you look at university guidelines for proper airflow within a bin, most universities say the same thing. Once we get above 25 foot in height, our effectiveness of the air that's being pushed from the fans loses effectiveness the higher we go. So, say we have a 60-foot diameter bin that's 70 foot tall, you could make the argument that a larger bin is going to have a higher probability of grain going out of condition if the wrong moisture grain was put into that bin in the first place, due to that bin not being able to dry wet grain in a bin that size appropriately. I don't care if you have 3 fans or 5 fans. Once you get above 25 foot, your effectiveness reduces as you get above 25 foot. So you could probably say that a larger bin is more likely to happen, but it still boils down to understanding the capabilities of your bin and what its conditioning capabilities are, and knowing that if I have a bin that size, I should not be putting grain in it that's too wet. It should be getting run through a dryer or coming out of the field dry. Unfortunately, that's not a conditioning bin. That's a cooling bin, really, at the end of the day. Rachel, thoughts on that?
Definitely. I mean, I think that that's something that would be helpful. So,
Yeah.
So,
and that's part of our safe
ahead.
storage assessment. Is part of that educational process, is running that aeration model and helping you understand, identifying what CFM does that bin have, and what are kind of the parameters for moisture that you should even consider putting into that bin before you even look at that. That's, again, part of the educational process that we hold very close to our hearts as we're walking through the process of doing that assessment with growers.
So Ryan, as you were talking, one thing that kind of came to my mind, and then I want to get back to some of these farmer questions, but and I don't know, just totally speculating, what is the average size of a grain bin on an on-farm operation? So not like a elevator, but an actual on-farm. Do you have any kind of sense of that? Are there a lot that are more than 25 feet?
Yes, we're seeing them. I mean, as we do quotes for our prospective customers, we see a lot of them that are, I would say, 12 to 18 rings high, whether that's a wide ring or a narrow ring. It's like anything else in this world, especially in agriculture, the bigger the better, right? That doesn't always translocate into being able to condition your grain better. You can hold more. So, I mean, 50,000 plus bushels is probably getting to be very common on a farm today, because we're farming more acres, we're harvesting more bushels. Instead of having 10, 30,000 bushel bins, I'm going to have, 300,000 bushel bins. Looking at, again, to Rachel's point earlier on economics, what cost advantages of just building 3 bins versus 10 type of deal. I think that's part of it that you see there. We do on average see bins getting built today being larger on farm, but I also, to that point, as more growers become more educated on proper grain conditioning, and what we try to say is put brains in the bin and looking at how to educate people on how to actually condition the grain. It's not just about storing, it's about conditioning it. At the end of the day, we are kind of seeing a trend of what I'll call more normal size bins or average size bins being built for a conditioning purpose, because growers are, again, we get in time like now where we have low commodity prices. We need to take advantage of every opportunity we can to market that grain correctly and to quality. So more growers are starting to focus on doing a better job of conditioning the grain, and a lot of times that boils down to a 25 to 30 foot tall bin versus the 60 to 90 foot bin.
Quick question for Ryan, and just in general, do they have classes for people that are building, when you ask someone, are you building a bin? Have you ever had bins on your farm? And some people are better at it than others, but are there classes that actually talk about what you should and shouldn't do for conditioning grain and different things like that? Or is that, because most of that knowledge to my personal perspective is something you learned from your dad, your grandma, grandpa,
Yeah.
whoever taught you. But let's say they never had bins and now we're going to have bins. They may not know a lot about them. And even with the best monitoring devices, that would be great assistance. Is there a way to, hey, you can take this course on managing your grain and keeping it in condition?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think there are classes out there, both on the educational side, like different university classes. I think that's part of some of their curriculum. FFA, I think always depends on the knowledge base of your advisor there.
Yeah.
So if I'm a young person and looking to farm or be involved in farm, I would take advantage of every chance to do something like that.
Yeah.
Also at AGI, we do provide what we call grain schools.
Okay.
Usually at least twice a year, depending on the demand, we may do more, but they can come down to our office in Lenexa, Kansas and participate in like a 2-day grain school where all we do is talk about proper grain conditioning and how to utilize technology to do that. So
that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think if we maybe promoted that in other areas, that might be a good resource just for the younger generation following, especially, if there's an accident that's already occurred on a farm, those people following probably likely to get rid of those bins or not use them, when they really could be useful, and you'd hate to see a resource wasted. Knowledge is safety in a lot of areas. So
yeah. And I think too,
guys,
sorry, Corey, but kind of back to the lapse of judgment though, too. I think it's something a grower needs to be mindful of. If we're looking at building a new bin, identify what do we want to do with that bin, right? I kind of view grain bin purchases almost like building a house, right? I have a budget on the farm. We always have a budget. I go out, I tell my bin builder what I want. And this isn't to throw down any bin builders, but it's just kind of a natural process. It's like, okay, I got the quote from my bin. Ooh, I don't like the looks of that price. What can I do to bring that down? Well, kind of like if you're building a house, if I'm coming in over budget, I'm 3-car garage. Now, instead of having 3 garage door openers, I got 1. Instead of having a 100-gallon water heater, I have a 50-gallon. Those little things bring the budget down. That's kind of what happens on a bin too. It's like, well, I had it spec'd out with 3 20-horse fans. You want to move it down to 10, that'll save you X number of dollars and reduce the number of vents. So again, if we're making that I mean, a grain bin is not a small investment. So if we're going to make that investment, let's get the most out of it and actually understand what that bin is going to be capable of for you, so we can avoid any type of potential entrapment incident because the grain didn't get conditioned the way we thought it would. I think that's very important from that standpoint.
Yeah.
All right.
Totally.
Yeah. So good discussion, guys. I love the back and forth. So it makes these panels so fun. Shifting gears a little bit, we did get to, this is kind of an out there technology question. I don't know how much exposure either of you have with it, but we did get 2 questions around the weevils. And so these weevils are robots that people put in grain bins instead of farmers going in. Any experience from either of you? I'll leave it open to either of you if you have any experience with these robots in Illinois or in the Midwest. Rachel, I see your head shaking your head no.
I don't have any experience with the robots, no.
Yeah, actually I do. Fortunate enough, through one of our other partners in the popcorn industry, got to meet the creator of the seed weevil or the grain weevil.
Cool.
Very good people. I think it's a great product. I do. It's a lower cost product, some that can probably fit into people's budgets. Again, it's going to depend on the severity of the unconditioned grain. If you got a foot or 2 of cement at the top of the bin, weevil is going to have certain capabilities. But if you're looking at just breaking up some crust, it's a lower cost option to try to address that, and definitely better than anyone entering into the bin. So that being said, yeah, I think that's a good product and a good option for someone. I know some of our AGI bin manager dealers actually have a side dealership with the grain weevil and utilize that as a service that for the growers that a bin monitoring system doesn't fit their budget. This is something that they can do. However,
would that be sorry.
I was going to say, however, though, it still comes back to proper grain conditioning. The whole reason you're having to look for a solution with the grain weevil is because that grain didn't get conditioned correctly in the first place. So again, it's a lower cost option. It is a good product, but if you look at spanning out that I mean, there's not too many things on the farm today that we make an investment where we're looking to pay it off in year one. A bin monitoring system like Bin Manager is the same thing, 2, 3, 4 years.
Mhm.
You can up your investment a little bit into a system like that and eliminate the need of a grain weevil. But for someone that has an immediate need for an immediate problem, I think that's a very viable option to look at a seed or a grain weevil and bust up some crust. But it still comes back to the number one reason that's in there in the first place, conditioning it properly from the get-go.
No, I appreciate that. And I like the thought that it's essential that we condition up front. Ryan, I think this question kind of goes back to your slides, and I wonder if you could answer it from maybe your experience, and then Rachel, maybe you could comment from an Illinois specific perspective. But it's just what types of accidents are most common? Flow, bridge, which I think we're talking about the crusting, or an actual collapse. So I'm thinking about that diagram you had during the presentation, Ryan. Do you have any, I don't know, maybe it's a quick answer, maybe you don't know, but is there one that's more common than the other?
I don't have specific numbers on those. I just know those are the 3 most common ones.
Rachel, I know you come in after the accidents happen. I don't know how much visibility you have to, you know, troubleshooting what led to the accident. You're just there to help people, but do you have any perspective on that?
The last several we've had have been a crust. There was one that was, they were, the third, I can't, it where he was using a tool to try and break it up along the side of the bend, and then it all started to run down and basically covered him up almost all the way. So true entrapments, but 2 different processes. But usually it's the top crust that we see, that people are up to their waist, up to their chest, up to their neck, or completely engulfed. And that's when we talk to them while we're rescuing them, as we're taught to do, say, hey, what are you doing? Like, what happened? Do you remember? And usually they're going to tell you, I was in here with my shovel like I always do, or I was just running around breaking up the crust. And I'm like, oh, again, you can't, how many 70 or older people ever really change their ways, right? Like, that's, you can tell them until the cows come home and don't do that. And they'll be like, well, I've done it all my life and I've never had any trouble. That's the frustrating part. So, but I would definitely say that the crust, or bridge is definitely something we see a lot of. So, and I don't, and again, it's grain management, but at the same time, it's also education to get them not to go in there. And like a weevil, like, is that something I was thinking that like, a community could go together and have one and anyone could use it? You know, I don't even know what they cost. So, with the tight margins, I don't know that that would be something a lot of people would be buying yet. So,
No, that's good thoughts, and I appreciate
yeah.
that kind of Illinois specific insight. So getting close to the top of the hour, so I'm going to have a follow-up question. This is one last question for both of you. And Rachel, I'll start with you. And I'm going to kind of combine 2 questions that we have here. One is very much a, you know, someone said, Rachel, what is the one thing you wish more farmers actually did on their operation? So like a simple, what is something they did? And then combine that with kind of another question we had, which was, have you ever been on a call? And this questioner obviously has kind of a suspicious perspective of this, but have you ever been on a call where a farm actually had all the safety stuff ready? So I assume
No,
you show up with a lot of safety stuff, but
right.
how many farms are actually ready to go from a safety perspective?
Yeah,
I think is maybe a way to ask that question. And then you know,
correct.
what's one thing? What's in there? What's one thing? And then Ryan, I'll
One,
got a last question for you.
yeah, one thing I would do, and it's hard, I get it. We farm ourselves, and time is of the essence, right? but I just really wish people would slow down when they're unloading. And if it is something that's crusted or clogged or something like that, turn everything off, take a breath, and figure it out from the outside. Don't make the deadly mistake to get in. That's what I wish everyone had a harness. I actually was talking about manufacturing them at a reasonable price where people would actually buy them and have them at every bin. But I don't know that that's possible. So I would tell people either get a buddy, have a spotter, but more importantly, turn everything off and try and figure out a safe solution. And have I ever been to a scene where there was everything? No, I have not. So there's usually no harness, no spotter. And even if there was a spotter, they didn't turn everything off. They left it running, and then that vacuum was created and down they went. So.
Yeah, and I'd agree with everything you just said, Rachel. I think too, again, it comes back to lapse in judgment. And, you know, Rachel, you say 70-year-olds changing their ways. Let's be honest, it's us, man. We're hard-headed.
Right.
And
right, we are.
like, oh, I'm gonna do this real quick and it'll be fine. But I think the biggest thing is, like Rachel said, is just take a minute, take a breath.
Yep.
And something I tell my kids, you know, as we're on the farm, it's like, before you do anything, think about what could happen if I do this wrong, or what's the worst thing that could happen to me right now with what I'm doing. And, you know, I think to the point of, even if you have all the safety equipment on hand, say I do have a 5-point harness and a rope.
Right.
Well, I still have to make that decision of judging, okay, how tight, how much length should be on that rope. It's one thing I could jump on there and just say, okay, I got a harness, I got a rope, I'll be fine. But if I don't actually evaluate how tightly that should be tethered, then, you know, what it was there, but what good did it do if I had it 6 foot too long and now I'm completely covered in grain? You know, these are the things. Before we, again, never get into that bin, but if you do, just stop and think about, I know there's a zillion things going on when we're trying to get things done, but if I do this wrong, what's going to happen?
Yeah. And just really quickly, if anyone out there is listening and thinks, well, I would have the rope and I would pull myself out, you really need to come to one of our trainings, and you'll very quickly realize that you will not be able to do that. So, yeah. And it's seconds and you're trapped. There's no feeling your feet anymore or any of those things. So, and I just think there's a lack of education about, well, I could get myself out. And you can't. And I just, even if we did general public, like just farmers, just come with your kids, let's do a simulator, see what it feels like. I think there would be some really big eyes by all the parents standing around. They'd be like, wow, that's really going to happen. So, yeah.
Because the PSI, or pressure, literally increases by the 100 at the further down into that grain you get.
Yeah. Yep.
So Rachel, I won't lie, you definitely read my mind, because when you guys were talking, I was very much like, oh, if you have a harness, you just pull yourself out real fast. So I appreciated that comment. All right. Yeah. So Rachel, Ryan, thank you again for joining us today, helping talk about this issue. The webinar will get shared out as a recording, and we'll continue to share this message. And this, you know, I think I like the message of never get in the bin. I like that. You know, Ryan, I think you both have kind of said that multiple times, so we appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And again, encourage you to become an Illinois soybean grower member.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here.